because we never met before. So in an email that he wrote to introduce himself to me, that after Christ Church College in Oxford University, it was downhill all the way, with him ending up becoming a builder during the Thatcher years in the UK. I'm sure there's an element of fiction in that, though, because he is now guest lecturer at the Colombo School of Architecture, which sounds terribly grand to me.
Trust me, it's not.
It's not. Well, you've written 3 books so far: Serendipity, called Petty People, and The Good Little Ceylonese Girl, all of which remain to date the biggest selling books in Sri Lanka by a local author writing in English. The books have been shortlisted for major awards in Sri Lanka: the Gratian, is that how it's pronounced? The Gratian Prize, and the State Literary Prize, thank you. But since there has been no win, Ashok describes himself again in that same rather problematic email, and a bit startlingly actually, given the hunky good looks, as always the bridesmaid, never the bride. He also told me that his day job is that of a personal trainer to the rich and the infamous of the city of Colombo, which is where he lives with his wife, 2 kids, and his cholesterol. Surely not. There isn't an ounce of fat on you.
It's true.
Oh, no.
Everywhere.
Anyway, all the personal compliments done with. Ashok will read from Serendipity today. Is that the only book you're reading from?
And from The Good Little Ceylonese Girl.
Okay,
some
good,
bits
good,
from
because
each.
I'll get to hear those as well. But this little synopsis, the potted synopsis I have here is for Serendipity, which is a novel that was written, correct me if I'm wrong, in the last months of Sri Lanka's 28-year-old civil war. It is a story of a girl, half Tamil, half Sinhalese, who comes back to Sri Lanka to reclaim her inheritance of a colonial villa in Colombo's posh cinnamon gardens. She falls in love with it and wants to keep it against the wishes of almost everyone else in the family, but there are disastrous consequences. Anuja Chauhan, the gorgeous Anuja Chauhan, is an author who's worked in the advertising agency JWT India for 17 years. Who would have thought, looking at her? Becoming vice president and executive creative director before she resigned in 2010 to pursue a full-time literary career. As a writer, she's best known for her best-selling contemporary rom-com novels, The Zoya Factor, which was published in 2008, and Battle for Bittora, which came out in 2010. Both books are delightful romances, the first set in the glamorous, high-pressure world of Indian cricket. I remember being convinced at the time when I was reading it that the hero of the book was Yuvraj Singh, who was then very young and very handsome. No, I never had the chance to ask. No, she says, so it's not Yuvraj Singh, how sad. The Battle for Bittora is set in the heat and dust of a Lok Sabha election. And again, I kept spotting real-life politicians in there, but I shall be good and name no names, seeing that there are elections coming up next year. And I'll just get Anuja saying, no.
He was based on Om Prakash Chautala.
Oh, thank you. Oh, my God, thank you. Anuja's 3rd book, and no questions at the end saying, who is this character and who is that character? Anuja's 3rd book is just out, literally so hot off the press that nobody's seen it yet, which is why I can't ask them any questions. Someone there has got it, but I haven't seen the book yet. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I think even Anuja's only just managed to get hold of a copy, so she will tell you a lot more about it. But it's got that characteristically quirky title that Anuja seems to specialize in, and I hope doesn't get you into trouble with the Thakur community. It's called Those Pricey Thakur Girls. Luckily, we'll hear straight from her what the book is about and whether she expects the Thakur community to embrace it to their hearts. Do you? So, should we start? I mean, would you be happy to say a little bit about what the books are about that you're going to be reading from? So, you've got 2 books to mention. Anuja, tell us a bit about the new book first.
Okay, so, well, like Jaishree said, I just got the book. I've just been looking at the PDF so far, so I'm quite excited about it. This book is, wow, to sort of summarize, it's set in 1988. It is a romance novel because I like writing romance novels.
I'm so glad.
But this is, it's actually also about a family, like a disputed house. So it's a lot about, shit, this is so confusing for me to say.
Actually, novelists are very bad at synopsizing their own books. That's why they write novels, isn't it? We don't know how to be brief.
So somewhere it's about 5 sisters, 5 alphabetically named sisters, and it's really a lot about the 4th sister and her life and how she's like a big-time celebrity because she reads the news on the local, the only TV network in India at that time, which is called Desh Darpan, and it is called Desh Darpan. She reads the news then, so she's really famous. And it's about her clashing with the print journalist community, which is actually, they have a lot of freedom and they can write what they like. And they sort of despise the, the Desh Darpan type of people. So it's really about that kind of a clash. It's about censorship. It's about the anti-defamation bill that was sought to be passed in 1988, and finally the bill was not passed. So it's also about that as well.
Amazing. I mean, it's always a very serious sort of setting and ideas, and you have these sort of romps, delightful little romps. So good. And are you going to read from, sort of give us something that will give us a flavor of the book?
No, I think we should.
Or you want to talk about your books?
Actually, the first thing I'm going to read, let me start by saying I'm from Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka is famous, rather sadly, for just two things, one of which is a 28-year-old civil war. The other one is the tsunami. So I thought, and since I'm a comic writer, I never get a chance to read sad things. So I thought I would start, the first thing I want to read is actually a sad story set during the tsunami. Interestingly, not much has been written about the tsunami. I think it was so huge in our lives that it is still, 9 years later, it is still too close to us. Do you want me to read first, and or shall we? Yeah,
why don't you, since you've set the scene? Yeah.
It's called Last Man Standing, and it's actually a true story.
This is a short story. Is it just to check?
Story.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, this is a short story from my book, The Good Little Ceylonese Girl. Last Man Standing. The Admiral watched the woman in the blue t-shirt feeding her two children. She was cutting up bacon for the younger one. The elder boy was flicking cornflakes around the open pavilion that served as a hotel dining room. It was too early in the morning for children. The Admiral looked glumly down at his plate of sticky rice and curried tuna. He was a very important person. He wore national dress at all times, the white tunic, the white sarong. So it was only natural that the hotel should choose to honor him with an ethnic breakfast. All the same, the bacon smelled wonderful. But noblesse will oblige, and the Admiral plowed on through his glutens. He could hear the manager of the hotel at the other table. "We're very pleased to have you back with us yet again this Christmas," he was saying to the woman at the other table. "How many years has it been in all?" 14, she replied. "Enjoy your meal." With great dignity, the manager removed a cornflake from his ear and retired, avoiding the Admiral's table altogether. The little boy burped. The woman giggled, and the Admiral stood up sharply, his chair falling back in outraged sympathy. Just then, the sunlight in the pavilion began to dim. Somebody was trying to turn it down so the real performance of the day could begin. And right on cue, the wave appeared in the far corner of the dining room, the roaring grey ghost at the Boxing Day feast. The elder boy was the first to react. He sprung up and faced the wave in a half-crouch. Then he hurled his bowl of cornflakes at it. The woman screamed. Instinctively, she put her arm around the younger boy. The older one ran towards her, and she gripped his hand, thinking, "Please God, may I be able to hold on to both." The head of the younger boy went under, and with a supreme effort, she managed to lift him above the surface of the water. As she did, she realized with a flicker of karmic horror that her grip on the other boy had weakened. "Amma," he said, with a look of mild reproach on his face. He was swept away in a sea of tables and chairs, cups and plates, all the detritus of a five-star hotel breakfast. That single word he spoke, that look he gave, would come back again and again to haunt her in the sleepless long night of the rest of her life. With the nimbleness born of years in the political arena, the Admiral leapt lightly onto a passing pentagama. He couldn't help noticing it was rather a fine antique chest, late 17th century Dutch, of flowered satinwood. It was quite seaworthy, really. Clipping his mobile to his ear to call for reinforcements, the Admiral floated smartly down past reception and out into open country. It was, he thought, rather like being back in the Navy again. The woman found herself wedged in the branches of a tree, her younger son clinging to her leg below. The rough bark felt strangely comforting, and she put her bruised face against it. She had swallowed so much mud and seawater. She felt as if all the ills of the world were within her. There was no sign of the other boy. She saw a figure floating towards her, its milky, cataracted eyes staring ahead, its gray hair spread out in a fan behind. "Over here," she cried. "I'm over here." But it was only a corpse on a log, drifting by, wide-eyed and serene, on its last journey home. The woman looked about her at the empty sea, the cruel sky. She thought of all the things left unsaid and undone in her life. She closed her eyes and was so very sorry. And then the second wave. A single chopper flapped in the sky, an unwieldy bird of prey looking for carrion, and 3 pajeros raced up to the preordained piece of high ground where it landed, offering up that choice morsel of humankind. Then they roared away again. And if they didn't seem to hear the moans of the bodies struggling in the mud all around, perhaps it was because their tinted windows were up and their air conditioning was on. From his seat high up in the air, the Admiral looked down on the lashing, curly-whirly sea below. All men are born to die, he thought with genuine regret. He clipped the buckle of his seatbelt tight, placing his fingertips precisely on it. But some men sooner than others, some sooner than others. The woman sat on the steps of the hospital where they had brought her with her younger son. Every time a lorry drove in, she ran to it screaming. The bodies were toppled off gently onto an ever-growing pile. I made the wrong decision, she thought to herself. How much better if we had all died in this. But she hadn't died. She had been left to live with a far more difficult task of grieving. As daylight faded and her hopes dissolved into the sooty blackness of dusk, the last lorry rolled in, but there were only more bodies on it. She turned to go when the passenger door of the cab opened and a small figure slid wordlessly to the ground. It was really too dark to see his face, though she didn't have to, because she could well imagine the look of mild reproach on it. Thank you very much. That is a true story, by the way.
Can I ask you, because you said being a comic writer, and I wanted to know whether you feel the pressure of having to talk about the misfortunes of a country when there are misfortunes happening, despite being a comic writer.
Yeah, it's a difficult act to pull off, actually. And in Serendipity, which is the novel I'm going to read from, I've tried to do it, but I've been bad-mouthed a lot because I think naturally I write comically. I mean, some people do, some people don't. And even when I write a serious thing, the comedy seems to come out. I mean, even here you have the Admiral, who, by the way, was a general in real life and a cousin of the president of the time. He died about a year or two back, so I'm quite safe in reading the story now. Because Sri Lanka is one of those places where people don't take kindly to you writing about them if they exist.
But you can defame dead people,
yeah,
can't
exactly.
you?
You can't defame dead people. Sorry.
So we have a reading from Anuja now.
Okay, I'm going to start right from the first page of the book, and you know, this is that first paragraph that you agonize over and over and you end up knowing it by heart. But it's just like the first 3 pages of the book, sort of setting up, you know, what the whole thing is. On a still evening in early April, when bees buzz torpidly amidst black-eyed sunflowers and the scent of mango blossom is in the air, one finds Justice Lakshmi Narayan Thakur, retired, clad only in his vest and pajamas, squatting in the grass, busily administering the death sentence to the upstart weeds that have dared thrust their cheeky, encroaching heads in his fragrant dogflower beds. Judge Saab is inordinately proud of his house, a pillared creamy white bungalow sporting dreadlocks of maroon bougainvillea. It is built on a 4,800 gaj plot along leafy Haley Road, with the ruins of a 14th century stepwell to the left and New Delhi's poshest commercial district, Connaught Place, to the right. A 7-foot-high boundary wall circles the garden, topped off with vicious bits of broken glass that gleam in the sun like salt upon the rim of a margarita glass. This precaution is less to discourage thieves. The judge admits that by the time he finished renovating the original structure, there wasn't much left inside to steal anyway, and more to daunt the many males spilling out of nearby modern school Barakamba Road, eager for a sighting of Judge Saab's true treasure, 5 delectable daughters, each one more beautiful than the other. Surveying his garden in the evening, inhaling the scent of wet earth and desi gulab, secure in the knowledge that wife and girls are safe within, the judge is often heard to observe that the word paradise evolves from the Persian peri diza, which simply put means walled garden. Next door stands the house of Justice Lakshmi Narayan's younger brother, identical in every respect, but somewhat shabbier. But then Ashok Narayan Thakur has only one son and no daughters to lavish their attentions on either house or garden. 3 of these paragons are now settled, and only 23-year-old Devjani and 17-year-old Ishwari remain at home. The 3 marriages, truth be told, have depleted the judge's purse even more than the renovation of the house has, but this is something he doesn't like bought up. A, B, and C might feel guilty, he cautions, and D and E will definitely feel shortchanged. But really, Mamtaji, I have no idea how we're going to give this younger brigade a decent send-off. At which Mrs. Mamta Thakur pats his bony shoulder and directs his attention to how thickly the Kamini is blossoming along the boundary wall. A lifetime spent amongst meticulously organized legal files and court libraries have moved the judge to name his daughters Anjini, Binodini, Chandrakanta, Devjani, and Ishwari, a decision that has earned him a reputation for eccentricity he doesn't really deserve. It has also caused his daughters to harbor a mild grouse against him. Naming us alphabetically in order of appearance, like we were building blocks in Chatranjan Park. It's so dehumanizing. Do you know, BJ, that's how Mr. Bumble named the orphans in Oliver Twist? So that's like a first little piece.
Is it my imagination or am I seeing something Austen-esque, Jane Austen-ish about this? I was just thinking these 5 girls and then this is the story of one of them.
Well, the thing is that I think I'm born in a family of 4 sisters. My mother was 5 sisters. And so I think when you sit down to write a book about sisters, these things come up, whether it's Austen or it's Louisa May Alcott, whoever. But there is something. I think maybe that's why people come back and write about sisters, because it is a very awesome way to grow up. So.
I know, it's rich, isn't it? It's a rich novelistic territory.
No, it's good fun. And also I did want to, typically these books always have, there's this mother who wants to get her girls married. And all 5 of them are unmarried. Now here, the 3 girls are married, they're done and dusted in that sense, settled ho gaye hain. And the younger 2 girls are at home and they're finally getting to rule the roost, I'm the youngest, my name means youngest sister.
Oh,
so you have this little brief time when all your big sisters are married and you're the boss in the house, it's great. But then they keep coming back, they don't ever go away.
Nuisance.
And they come back with like grandchildren, for your parents, and they sort of take all the attention and stuff. So I did really want to write about that. And because it's 88, it's just like a little bit of that thing coming back in from my childhood and stuff.
Why Pricey Thakur girls?
Because so they live on Haley Road and there's lots of other families and they say, oh, those Thakur sisters are so pricey. So all these hopeful boys who are hanging outside the gate and sort of, with holding their hearts and their private parts, as the book says. And the Thakur girls are like not very sure they're giving them the
I can imagine how desperate those poor boys must have been if your sisters are as good looking as you are. So. Do we get another reading from Anuja? I think Serendipity first, because that's the book that's the most recent one, isn't it? That's all right? Then we'll come back to the Pricey Thakur girls after that for some.
I'm waiting for that.
Serendipity is the sort of the more blackly comic.
Yes.
Book,
It's a novel that I wrote at the end of the war, and it's set during the war. The heroine is Pumi, who's half Sinhalese, half Tamil. She's come back to Sri Lanka to reclaim her share of the inheritance, which is a colonial villa, which all her relations want to chop up. She doesn't, she wants to keep her bit of it. And nobody seems to agree with her, not even her own mother back in London, who wants the dosh, who wants her to bring back the cash. I'm going to read a bit, actually, there's a hero also. There's a hero and a heroine, and the hero is a young Polish guy called Marek, who is always trying to hook up with her and sort of is always kind of failing to at various points of the novel. So I'm going to read a little bit about the two of them heading off for a weekend. He has high hopes of this weekend. She has other ideas. But she really wants to get away because life has been quite tough back in Colombo. So they're on the road to Benthota, which is down in the south of Sri Lanka. It's a lovely seaside resort. The road to Benthota, possibly like the road to hell, was paved with election rallies. As beach after beach unrolled to their right, Pumi realized afresh how easy it was to fall in love with this country. Everywhere there were vast cutouts of candidates. There's an election going on, by the way, in the middle of all this. Vast cutouts of candidates fringed with brown and gold or orange and silver, depending on which party. At Panadura, they inadvertently joined a cycle race, but the cyclists sped on, their skinny spandex bottoms bobbing up and down like trumpet stops, leaving the car sputtering in their wake. At Benthota, all was calm till they tried to check in. The clerk at reception greeted them with a big smile. "Ah, the wedding party." "There's been some mistake," Pumi said. "We specifically reserved..." Oh, sorry, let me go back. "Ah, the wedding party. We have reserved the honeymoon suite." "There's been some mistake," said Pumi. "We specifically reserved 2 singles. We must have separate rooms." "That bad already, huh?" "Sorry, no can do. The party convention is on and all the candidates are here. We are chock-a-block as it is. It is the last big meet before elections." Yes, thought Marek, yes, yes. He tried not to let it show on his face. They could see the election candidates by the pool with their beer and bites, swishing about in enormous Bermudas, gold medallions glinting on furry chests. There was loud music by the Cripsies, and a few were attempting to baila with each other, like dogs half-heartedly attempting to mate. "I hope they govern better than they dance," whispered Pumi. "We have sent up a complimentary love cake," said the clerk hopefully. "Also a bottle of milk wine. Enjoy. And don't worry," he added as an afterthought. "It does get better. You have to work at it, though. 30 years, my mother said. That is why I never married." There was a large double bed in the room, also a bath big enough for 2. "You stick to your side of the bed," warned Pumi darkly. "I'll stick to mine." "Understood," said Marek, a little too promptly. In the end, his hand did stray, and before they knew it, they were entwined. She was, anyway, far too good a person to say no to anyone who asked nicely. "Oh, all right," she said with a sort of fond familiarity. Then she shut her eyes and thought about her house, Serendipity. Afterwards, they talked long into the night in the tradition of lovers. She told him how much the country was beginning to get to her and how important for her to save even the smallest piece of serendipity. It pained him that her plans didn't seem to include his presence in any way or his well-being. But he was used to sadness. At times, it seemed to him his whole life was one long sadness. So this was nothing new, nothing unexpected. If I waited out long enough, she might change her mind, he thought, with a sort of futile optimism that was hardwired into his regret. So he put his troubles aside and concentrated on hers. There is room for only one set of sorrows in any relationship. "Maybe you could buy Serendipity," he suggested. "Yeah, right. No, I mean it. If you could get your mother to sell one of her flats. In fact, I could help. I have money in the bank." "No," she said immediately. It was too easy, too pat. She didn't want to be under obligation to anyone, least of all Marek. Too much was expected of her in that quarter. There was only one way she could repay such a loan, and it was too big a sacrifice as far as she was concerned. Next morning, there was a rose on that table. The manager came up with a worried look on his face. "I have bad news," he said. "I know you lovebirds are just dying to get into the pool, but I'm afraid you can't. We've had to shut it down." "Oh?" "It's the dear Deputy Minister of Solid Waste. Lovely man. He's so used to passing resolutions and amendments. Well, it seems last night he passed something else. The manager wrung his hands helplessly. I don't know why he didn't use the C. Everybody else does. We'll have to drain the pool and sterilize. It's caused a much bigger stink than that last IMF loan. They drove back late Sunday night. Will you take over? She asked halfway through. I'm tired. There was a necklace of lights strung out over the horizon from fishing boats far away at sea. She purred gently in her sleep by his side as he negotiated the car over the railway tracks at Berulla and on into the dreary, endless suburbs of Colombo. Their myriad neon-lit shops, each selling the identical T-shirt, the exact same tin of canned fish, the ubiquitous packet of powdered milk. It was as if they'd been married years and years and were returning from their usual weekend on the coast. I wouldn't want anything more than this, he thought. I wouldn't want her to love me. This is enough. Dear God, he prayed, is this really too much to ask? Thank you.
It's wonderfully clever because I could see that the juxtaposition of humor and pathos and how you were managing to well, bring smiles and
to balance it out.
Yeah. Is that difficult?
Well, difficult in that it's difficult to justify to people afterwards, I think. Because people are used to a straight serious novel or a straight comic novel. They're deeply suspicious. I was saying this earlier on. We did a comic session earlier on, which you may have caught, where I said, why is it that people are suspicious of humor? They think that there's something vaguely disreputable and raffish and shameful about humor. If you write humor, you really are below the belt. I don't know.
In the previous session I was in, which was about the craft of writing, we were talking about sex scenes as well and how bad men are generally at sex scenes. Yeah. And I noticed you cut away very quickly at establishment.
Yes. Oh, you just read my new book when it comes out.
Is that comic as well?
There's a lot of that in it.
Is there? It's very hard to do that without wanting to be comic as well.
Well, it's true. Or it's just laughable anyway, even if it isn't comic.
So more on the Pricey Thakur girls, I think,
yes.
at this point. Also, an author who's very good at humor. I don't know how many of you would have read the previous books, but more straightforwardly, sort of funny, laugh out loud comedy. I love your humor.
Thank you.
So, do we have a humorous passage?
I was actually thinking of introducing my girl and my boy.
Okay.
And
no sex scenes.
I don't do sex. I mean, not in books.
Not in books.
Because no. I'm just happy with conversation and eye contact. I keep it pretty clean. I have 17-year-olds in the house.
Yes, who want to know what you're writing.
Yeah, no, but I really, I think there's a lot more. It's easier to get people involved if you don't get too explicit, and it's all just implied and sort of, simmering rather than going over the top. That's how I feel about the sex part of the whole question. Okay, here's a piece that introduces Debjani, who's the sister with the D name. Okay. Just a little bit about her, and then a little bit about my boy, which comes up later.
The boy being the one who's pursuing her.
The boy being the one who's pursuing her,
because I get
all the stuff I get from people who write into me is like, so who's the hero? What does he do? What's his name? So I end up feeling like this real mom of the hero character, and you have sort of put him out into the world and hope people like him. So, but this is a little piece about Debjani and what's going on with her. Her whole problem is that her elder sister is extremely beautiful, and she looks like her elder sister, but she's not as pretty. And so that's a bit sad because she's sort of like this carbon copy, which is not very nice for her. And everyone says, she's nice, but not as nice as Anjani. Anjani is so beautiful. So that's her whole tragedy in life. And besides, the family astrologer has made a prophecy about her. So I'll just read that little bit. Shastri Ji is the family astrologer, and relations between the judge and him have been fraught ever since the judge chose to name his daughters so arbitrarily. The fates are greater than ABC. Shastri Ji has rebuked the judge, who had unrepentantly asked why, if the fates were so great, Shastri Ji didn't become a full-time astrologer and give up selling Sumit mixer grinders on the side.
Shastriji had responded by predicting the judge's imminent demise by a painful, not very polite disease and departed in a huff. That pompous pigtail, the judge snorts now. We should never have told Debjani about what he said. That wretched thing has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. According to Shastriji, whom Mrs. Mamta had consulted after Debjani accidentally sat down on a steaming hot pressure cooker when she was 5 and drove a needle through her own nostril in sewing class when she was 10, Debjani's stars are in a sleep state known as Suptavastha. This is what was causing her to walk into walls, forget to dilute her bucket of hot water with cold before pouring it over her body, and sinking her nose luxuriously into roses seething with teething bumblebees. Her stars will remain in Suptavastha until she turns 23, and then he had snapped his fingers, his eyes glowing behind his rather spiffy cherry-red spectacles. She would awaken to fortune and fertility and fame. The judge tried to discourage this theory from taking hold, concerned that it would give Debjani an excuse to be a slacker in school and pile up too much expectation on her later, but it caught the imagination of her older sisters. Debjani was teased every time she gazed dreamily out of the window, which was often, and many parallels were drawn with the tale of the sleeping beauty who was awakened by true love's first kiss. So this is Debjani, and here I have a little piece talking about, where Dylan is from. Dylan is a very committed journalist, and he is somebody who takes his job extremely seriously. At the back of the book, he's described as someone with shining professional credentials and tarnished personal reputation.
Oh, dear me. This is the sort of raffish guy every girl loves, isn't it?
So when petite Juliet Lobo met dashing Second Lieutenant Sahas Singh Shekhawat on his Mangalore posting in 1958 and married him almost immediately, both families were appalled. But Juliet and Sahas didn't care. They were happy in their little billeted home, and soon they produced Dylan, the 14th Rajputana Rifles' favorite child, practically a mascot. You've done the impossible, Shekhawat. Sahas's commanding officer would often marvel, dandling the large-eyed, hawk-nosed, muscular infant on his knee. You've created a Christian Rajput. What the hell is a Christian Rajput? Either you're meek and mild, or you're bloodthirsty and wild. You can't be both. Poor, confused child. Give him a Coca-Cola, someone. Undeterred, Sahas and Juliet proceeded to create 2 more Christian Rajputs, Jason Singh Shekhawat, and after a long gap, Ethan Singh Shekhawat. All 3 boys grew up to be tall and handsome like their father, muscular and devout like their mother, and extremely creative in the ways of doing mischief, a trait that was their very own and inherited from no one on either side of the family. With 3 such energetic creatures hammering away at the defenses, the families thawed eventually, and the boys ended up spending most of their holidays at their Grandma Lobo's home in Mangalore. They ran about under the banana tree canopies in nothing but baggy shorts, strings of rosary beads bouncing on their sun-browned chests, playing footballs in the waves, their aquiline Rajput noses, just like the spouts of those big aluminum kettles bar, peeling in the hot summer sun. For more lively entertainment, they tied a thin string to the bell inside the convent and jerked it from their home across the street at midnight, leading the nuns to believe that the chapel was haunted. They phoned the Vase Bakery and ordered cakes iced Happy Birthday Susanna or Get Well Soon Marietta, and derived much merriment from watching them languish unclaimed in the bakery shop window for days on end. Because Juliet had told them so much about her own love story, making it sound more and more lyrical with each retelling, the boys grew up to be almost naively romantic. She also impressed upon them, especially on Dylan, the eldest, that girls were pure, delicate creatures who needed to be cherished and respected and protected. With the result that when Dylan, after 17 years of living in an all-boys home and studying in an all-boys school, burst upon the co-educational world of St. Stephen's College, he was starry-eyed, hopeful, and looking for his one true love. This attitude, coupled with his undeniable hotness, skilled guitar playing, and prowess at football, naturally caused all the girls to throw themselves at him. He fell violently in love and confessed his feelings in a straightforward style. She led him a merry dance, and after 3 tumultuous weeks, dumped him for being too boring and took up with a senior who treated her badly. After that, he learned the art of keeping girls guessing. That worked much better. 10 years on, he's a master player, an accomplished flirt, wary of commitment, and the only kind of protecting he's into comes from the chemist and costs 10 rupees for a packet of 3. Naturally, his mother is worried. She has just quit her job at St. Columba's School, where she reigned for 20 years, loved and feared in equal measure by legions of sweaty, spotty, and sporty schoolboys, who dubbed her the lobster and acquired, in spite of themselves, an appreciation for art in her painting and sculpture class. And now that she's finally free to design a tasteful wedding card, plan an artistic church wedding, and welcome a beautiful, accomplished daughter-in-law into her all-boys home, her wretched son isn't willing to oblige. She frets constantly to her brushes and her bartans, to Mrs. Mamta Thakur, to fellow passengers on DTC buses. When he was little, he used to say, Mama, I'll find a nice girl quickly, okay, and I'll love her and I'll love her and I'll love her till we have 15 children. And now just see Ba, almost 30 years old, and Thenga to show for it. Thanks.
Do you have to work at being funny, or does it just come naturally?
I'm never trying to be funny.
No, but it is.
Yeah, but I
this is
find
how
when I
you
try
are.
to be funny, it's terrible.
No, that's the problem, isn't
Yes.
it? One can't try to be funny.
I think you just observe a lot of people and, you know, you see what they say and
and the
it's just
stories, I mean, I'm tempted to imagine this comes straight from your life or your childhood, your experiences, because you said you're from the Thakur community. But
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
written 3 books, they can't all have come from your life
No,
and your
no, no.
experiences.
I think you just pick out like one little bit, you know, there'll be somebody you know, someone you meet at a party, someone who has like a funny, interesting story or whatever, and you just shamelessly rip off. And now people tell me, don't tell Anuja anything because, you know, she has no imagination. She just like puts stuff from people's
She'll
lives.
put it in her next book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we getting more on the Thakur girls for
I
a
can
bit?
read an interaction between Dylan and Debjani. I could do that
Okay,
after
yeah.
we go next. Huh?
I think carry on because, it's in the
Okay,
mood
this
for-
is a little further because now this is, you know, so Dylan comes over to Debjani's house to play court piece with her father, and then he's told that if your intentions are not serious, please don't bother coming around anymore, which he finds very strange and very old-fashioned. And this is a conversation they have around that time. And so, when the appropriately attired but completely clueless Debjani alights hunchingly from a DTC bus in front of the AIR studios the next morning, she finds a tall, lithe figure of Dylan Singh Shekhawat lounging against the Shalimar Pan Bhandar kiosk, waiting for her. Debjani instantly unhunches. Her chin shoots up into the air, she tosses her dupatta and a regal gesture over her shoulders, and stalks right past the lounging Shekhawat, totally ignoring his half-sardonic, half-goofy smile. Hey, Dylan demands as he scrambles to keep pace with her. Didn't you see me? Debjani whirls to look at him. I did, but as your father said you'd gone back to Bombay on some urgent work, I assumed it was an unpleasant hallucination brought about by indigestion. Damn, Dylan thinks. So Dada fed them some bullshit story to cover up for my absence. Why hadn't Ethan found out about that yesterday? Aloud he says, I did go to Bombay, but now I'm back. Hi. That was quick, Debjani says ironically. As far as I know, Air India flies to Bombay just once a week. He looks caught out. She smirks and starts walking faster, files clutched to her chest. Dylan gives chase. Debjani, wait, he pleads. Listen, I've come specially to meet you. Can't we talk? What about? She walks even faster. I want to apologize, he says, for, you know. His voice falters and drops as she stops and looks at him. For kissing you. Her eyes widen. When? Dylan comes to a halt, gives a short, disbelieving laugh. You're going with amnesia? Wow, that's mature. She stops too. Oof, of course I know when, she admits crossly. Just why exactly did you kiss me anyway? Because I'm a horny bastard, because I couldn't help myself, because your face is the face of the Madonna in my dead grandmother's garden. He doesn't say any of this aloud. He shrugs. It seemed like a good idea at the time. His eyes lock into hers. Why didn't you stop me? I did, she says at once. Liar. There's a long pause. Finally, Debjani says, yeah, okay, so I didn't stop you. Big deal. Why are you apologizing? It wasn't such a dead loss as kisses go, you know. He raises his eyebrows. Quite the little kiss connoisseur, aren't you? Debjani, whose only long, lingering kisses have come from Moti, Boti, and their offspring, manages to look convincingly worldly wise. Oh, one gets around, you know how it is. Dylan, who has always believed in gender equality and in girls having their fair share of fun, immediately wants to line up everybody who has ever touched her and shoot them dead. Well, that's kind of a relief, he says casually, that you understand, that it was just a kiss. She gives him a withering look, throws her dupatta all over her shoulder, and starts walking again. Dylan strides alongside, his long legs easily keeping pace with hers. Still, no matter how many people you've allegedly kissed, I realize that your value system is slightly different from mine. This had sounded far less glib when he rehearsed it at home. So I just wanted to say that I'm sorry if my actions led you to think there was something more. Why is this so damn difficult? There was some serious intention behind that kiss, because there wasn't, at least not yet. Is that it? She says in a small, tight voice. Dylan reminds himself that he has important work to do. Yes, pretty much, that's it. Sorry again. What a smooth, snaky little speech, Debjani thinks savagely. I wonder how many times he's made it. Oh, that's fine, she assures him steadily. I've no use for a man whose own father admits he's a fickle, striped insect, flitting from flower to flower, dipping its proboscis into every sticky stigma that's stupid enough to open up for him. Dylan's eyes widen. Dada said that. Debjani looks a little shifty, more or less. He said proboscis. Debjani looks even shiftier. The truth is that she is grossly exaggerating the overheard conversation. It was conducted in the drawing room after the court piece session. It ended with the judge asking his friend what the devil he meant by introducing a Casanova into his house, to which the brigadier replied that the judge was the one who had come galloping to the gate, flagged down the car, and virtually handed his good-for-nothing son a total access pass. Eventually, they both agreed that the entire blame could be laid at the late Balkishan Bau's door and parted friends. Yes, she says sweetly, your father said so. And I like my proboscis is pure and committed and exclusive, thank you very much. There's a long silence. Two girls in burqas bang almost right into them, then circle around and walk on tittering. But that's no reason we can't be friends, the words almost burst out of him. Friends who kiss? Yes, he persists doggedly, hardly knowing what he's saying. Why do all girls talk like that sign in the Giggles gift shop window anyway? Nice to look at, nicer to hold. If you break it, consider it sold. You're just giving away how cheap your thinking is with that obnoxious remark, she says. Is that how you and Justin and Nathan talk in your chauvinistic all-boys household? Jason and Ethan, you mean, he says, stung. At least I remember all your sisters' names, Apple, Ball, Cat, and Elephant. She glares at him, he glares back. A machine ka thanda pani cart hovers next to them, hopefully. I'm not into friendships that lead nowhere, Dylan, she says at last. There's no shy faltering over his name now, he notices with a pang. No looking at his shirt collar instead of his eyes. I told you I don't flirt. And I'm not into pretty mouthpieces who read out the news without thinking twice about what they're saying, he snaps. How could you smile after saying that the Special Investigation Committee had cleared Hardik Motla of all charges? How could you smile? Who's Hardik Motla? Debjani falters, confused. Dylan makes a hasty movement towards her, his eyes blazing with such fury that for a moment she's almost scared. Then he steps back, taking a deep breath, and slides his hands into the pockets of his jeans. Never mind, he says, leave it. Look, I have a lot of work to do, you know. Debjani shrugs, so go do it. Oh, I'm going, he assures her, blocking her path, rooted to the road. She stares at him for almost an entire minute, but all he does is stare right back like he's incapable of moving. People inside the AIR building start to nudge and point. Finally, Debjani makes an infuriated little noise, steps around him and walks away, blinking back tears, furious with herself and swearing she will never, ever speak to him again.
Oh no, they're scrapping away this bear. And then I looked, you're only halfway through the book, luckily, so hopefully there's plenty of time to make up. And for that happy ending, I won't ask the ending because you all have to rush off and buy the book. There's time, I think, Ashok, for maybe one reading from you, and then we'll have to open it up to the audience.
What shall I give you? Okay, this is a bit set during the elections, and this entire book I sort of shoot out at everybody and anybody, so which is why I'm critiqued so much about it. But I have a real go at politicians. When I wrote this book, actually, one of the political guy in here was called Fonseca, and then I realized to my absolute horror that one of the presidential candidates in that last election was called Fonseca. And I remember training somebody, actually it was the British High Commissioner's wife, who said, please take it out. You know, you don't know what you're doing. You know, if you don't take that name out. I said, it's too late, it's gone to the printers. There's no way. As it happened, I was very lucky because dear Mr. Fonseca never read a book. But by the time the next lot of books came out, the next edition, I changed it. I changed the name. The elections were planned to take place just before Sri Lankan New Year. This was not to aid the general public so much as politicians themselves, who would be sent off after their labors to relax at an appropriate venue. If you had been especially successful, you were dispatched to the steamy flesh pots of Bangkok. Otherwise, it was the cool climes of Norelia for you, where you wore flat caps and played golf and generally behaved in a dated 1930s manner. Yet others prefer to observe the wildlife in Yala, so much more tame than your own wildlife back in Colombo, though it was always enjoyable and instructive to watch other predators in action. Anything really but the Eco Lodge in Anuradhapura. This was why you were posted if you had only scraped through with a wafer-thin majority. Here you survived without electricity, washing your clothes in the stream with sunlight soap, brushing your teeth with charcoal, and generally having a miserable time and pretending you loved it because, at last you were at one with your own people. If the mosquitoes didn't get you, the tigers probably would. If you survived, you generally came back a broken man. Evangeline Fonseca wasn't going anywhere. New York or nothing, she had told her husband, and since New York was too far, they would stay put. She had high hopes that after the elections, the minister was destined for greater things than mere infernal affairs. He was giving a big rally at the stadium just before Election Day. Nobody in the party could pull in crowds like he could. And he'll need me then, she thought grimly. There may be any number of interns. There is only one wife. The inhabitants of Serendipity weren't going anywhere either, but only because they couldn't afford it. There was a sort of uber snobbery about this. Their grandfather had once owned a magnificent bungalow up in Norelia, long since sold. Nowadays, Norelia belonged to the riffraff, with their poxy, boxy Swiss chalets and their tiny, shiny, techno-Japanese lodgers. Anyway, it was the perfect time of year for Colombo 7. The streets with their giant flowering trees were suddenly empty of people, and you could actually hear the birds sing, and you were back in time 20 years, when the parapet walls to these houses were just waist high, and the only sign of life on the streets was the occasional lottery ticket seller, or a man shouldering an enormous gunny sack of oysters for sale. And the oysters were not for eating, of course, but for the occasional pearl you might find within, which was better than any lottery ticket. Only one thing marred this peace, the threatened lack of staff. At New Year, everyone wanted a minimum 2 weeks off. 2 weeks without bread and milk and newspapers was bad enough. 2 weeks without a kitchen maid was a plain insult. Every New Year, the cook left for almost a month. It was only fair, since she never went anywhere the rest of the year. This left Surangani, who was, as always, open to negotiation. She would begin with her opening gambit. My sister's getting married. I may have to leave a little early this year. People don't get married at New Year, Ganga would retort sharply. Besides, I didn't know you had a sister. She's my cousin brother's sister-in-law's eldest uncle's youngest daughter. Very close then. I promised to be there to help with the sheets. Sheets? You know, the morning after, duh. She didn't actually say duh, but she meant it. If Ganga was shocked that in the village they still inspected nuptial sheets the morning after, she had the good sense not to show it. With Surangani, you never knew. She might even have been telling the truth. Of course, if I send them a very good present. Ganga saw her opening and seized it. What present? That sari you wore for the Aluvihare wedding? Ganga was speechless. That's a Benares. Those threads are dipped in pure gold. Surangani concentrated her attention on a dust ball that had got stuck on the bedspread. She flicked it experimentally. You can have that very smart blue nylon I got in Madras. Nylon? Asked Surangani. Nylon? Her voice was thin, the question rhetorical. She didn't expect a reply. Then the red and white candy stripe Pumi's mother sent me from London. I remember when you got that, said Surangani dreamily. You said the woman must be blind. You said you'd wear it the day you got a job outside a barber shop, turning round and round like a pole. Surangani paused a moment. Then she said almost indistinctly, barefoot. Barefoot? Barefoot. The orange and pink silk from barefoot. Ganga knew when she was beaten. Just imagine the lower classes demanding silk saris from barefoot. Why didn't they ask for cake? So much easier and a whole lot less expensive. Thank you.
Lots of resonances for the Indian housewife and all the bargaining with the maid and, you know, don't go for this wedding, and the Banaras sari and the nylon. So thank you for that. Right, questions? We can have 10 minutes of questions. So there's hands shooting up everywhere. Is there a roving mic?
Hi, my question is for Anuja. I noticed that you were introduced as a rom-com author. And how do you characterize your work? I mean, is it rom-com or dare I say chick lit? What do you think of it yourself?
See, I'm very wary of labels. I find that labels keep me away from good books. You know, if someone tells me, oh, it's a literary novel, I'm never going to pick it up. You know, so so I think that you should just pick up a book and make a little discovery. Because if someone told me this is crime and this is rom-com and this is chick lit and this is, I know what the polite word is, lad lit, you know, so it just keeps you from picking up something and making a nice discovery along the way. So for me, there are good books and bad books. So I try not to go there, and I try not to do it to other people's books as well. Huh? What, being called a rom-com? No, I'm quite, I mean, rom-com is the least offensive, I would say. Because I say, yes, I am doing that. I am writing romance and I'm writing comedy. I've been advised I should call it satire because that sounds much more intelligent. But out of all the labels I've been hit with, I don't mind rom-com.
And Jane Austen was the rom-com of her day. Let's not forget.
Jane Austen is also a label.
Okay.
I know, I felt that as well. In my introduction, I called it rom-com. I said it was Austen-esque. I'm in trouble. What about you? Do you sort of label yourself, allow yourself to get labeled?
No, I'm with Anuja on this one because, you know, it's really, I think it's a market-driven thing that we're forced into little pens like kind of battery hens, you know. There's really, you know, there's writing and there's not writing, you know, and you just write what's inside you.
Yeah,
you can't.
Question?
It's not a question as such, but I just want to say something.
Oh, there you are.
Hi, Anuja. Sanya here. You know me, I guess.
Yes.
And I'm a big fan of your writings, you know that. I wanted to take off from the previous question. I'm a student of English literature. I'm doing my pre-PhD in English literature, and actually my professors tell me to write on these kind of topics because they haven't been, you know, written on, like chick lit or young adult fiction or anything that concerns the Indian genre in a way. So I don't know why you're wary of the label as such, because I think in this age of technology and so on, we have metro reads and other labels that characterize, that come under the broad category of bestseller. You know, the bestseller is being redefined in new ways every time. So what do you think about that? And why do you think that writers always talk about good writing and bad writing? And why do always, obviously the publishers will obviously talk about it as rom-com because they have to sell the novel. And so obviously there's this commercialization of writing in that way. But I want to know why you are so wary of labels. I mean, you answer that question, but at the same time, why not, why should we, it's nothing derogatory about these books because we should be fine with the fact that there's light reading and heavy reading and there's no line in between because the lines have been blurred.
I don't know. I mean, I just resent being put in a box. You know, I would react the same way people said, oh, your style of dressing is boho chic. What does that mean? You know, I mean, or whatever it is that people come out, you know, people are always trying to like stick you into some kind of a label, which I deeply resent, you know. So I'm saying, yeah, okay, I like writing funny books. I like writing books which have that, you know, that give you what my sister calls a stupid smile. You know, the romance gives you like a stupid smile, like an awe kind of a smile. So yeah, I like writing like that, and I like making people laugh. I also like making them think. So it just comes from inside me. I can't help it. I have this thing with saying, oh, you're this. Like Bon Jovi saying he's a pop star.
There's a question there for the gentleman.
I'm not a student of English literature, neither am I doing a PhD, but I do read a lot. My question is, how do you get discovered as a writer? In the sense, I've been going to bookshops for all my life. Most of the bookshops in India now in the big cities are franchised and chain stores and classified as thriller or whatever. And I find them the worst bookstores to go to because there's a huge choice but no knowledge. There's a lot of information but no knowledge, no recommendation. Personally, I have a favorite bookstore in Delhi, although I live in Bombay, and it's called the Bookshop in Jorbagh, where the owner knows his books, he knows what you want, he gives you ideas, you discuss them, and lots of people who go there actually talk the language of books. And there's so few knowledgeable bookstore owners in this country. So if I wanted to know about the two of you, except for coming here, I would not have known.
So is that a question? Or were you appreciating the fact that, appreciating the fact that you've had a chance to discover new writing by attending a festival? That in a way is what festivals are for. Because you're right, the bookshops are so crowded with new books coming in and, you know, so many names on the, it's difficult to pinpoint.
Well, you don't, you starve most of the time. I mean, you know, I mean, things, you're quite right. Things are so market driven now that apparently even what shelf you're on matters and how many days you're on the shelf. I mean, it's like a supermarket, you're buying vegetables, you know, once you get past your sell-by date, you're off that shelf, you know. So it's sad but true. So I do agree with you. There's nothing we can do about it.
Which is lovely now that they have such, you know, they have reading clubs and you get invited, and that's really nice. I mean, I love meeting people like that because, you know, everyone has read your book, and that whole word of mouth thing, and there's a lot of that stuff happening also. And it's so nice to have that going on and to have that interaction. I think that's something I would rely on more than saying which book is in that top 20 or whatever, you know. Not that I have any, that's one label I don't mind, best-selling, a good label.
Except that it's used very loosely sometimes as well, isn't it? Every other book has that, that description. Questions, anyone? Think we have? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I've just been told we've run completely out of time. I get this signal from the back sometimes with people saying, stop it, enough? No, so we're winding up very quickly. Just to say that Ashok and Anuja will be signing books at the festival bookshop. There's a little desk outside, so do go rushing off and buy them. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I lost track of a little bit of the time there, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Very ill-prepared.
Thank you very much for this lovely session. We have small gifts for the three of you. And you can also authors at the author signing counter, the book signing counter, which is on the left of this thing. Thank you so much.